I'm James Hughes, bioethicist and resident techno-progressive.
And I'm Eisikovits, philosopher and resident Luddite.
And you're listening to Prosthetic Gods, an optimist and a grump on tech, a podcast where we explore the social, ethical, and political impacts of emerging technologies.
So we have a guest today. So our listeners get a break from my and Jay's squabbling about who's completely right about technology being a disaster. And we're very happy to have Tal Hessner here. Tal straddles the worlds of industry and academia as a professor at Penn University, but has also been a lead scientist both in Amazon and Meta. And we will mainly be talking about deep fakes, their history, their problems, their potential.
Can you remind us a little bit of the history? Because I remember that Facebook, I think Google and maybe Apple also had introduced automatic face tagging at a certain point like a decade ago and then took it away again because people freaked out. Is that correct history? Or has it still been there in the background? I just wasn't noticing.
In very, very high level terms, the face recognition became all the rage about 2012, 2013, maybe going back a little bit further, 2007, I think, ish, federal government had a big project. They had these every so often to see or to measure the state of face recognition. And one of the outcomes of that research, as a paper that published at the time, was that on many tasks, face recognition by a computer outperforms humans. So this is 2007, and already there were talk of computers being better than humans. Thing is with face recognition is that there's no such thing as 90% or 50%. This doesn't work with absolutes. It really depends on the scenario. It really depends on what you're measuring. It really depends on the circumstances. And those tests were on what we consider today to be constrained circumstances. So when a person walks up to a camera and wants the camera to recognize them, so face unlock, for example, or accessing a sensitive area in your factory. And when they took those technologies, 2006-07, when they took those technologies and tried to apply it to just any regular photo, they collapsed. They were unable to do anything. And again, humans were way better. There was benchmarks at the time. Humans were getting 96, 97%, and doesn't matter of what, but computers were doing a lot worse.
So you're saying you can train a computer to recognize your face, but then if you give it the same information and try to recognize it out of a billion faces, it'll have a hard time.
That wasn't the case. The distinction that I'm making is between the ease of the settings. When you want to be recognized, you look straight at the camera. You occupy most of the frame. You make a stern face. You take off your glasses and so forth. In the settings that were introduced in 2008, it was suddenly pictures from your vacation and wherever. So it was sunglasses and a hat, laughing, looking at the side with a bunch of other faces around you, and that computers were unable to do at the time. And it took something like that's where I pretty much started working on this, and it took about 5 years-ish before computers were already reaching the level of humans with that, and then that became product. It became something that the industry wanted to use. And that's when Facebook and Google and Amazon and many others started. Amazon was a bit later than that, but started to jump on that bandwagon. The off switch came around, I guess, it's not one date, but it's around 2020, 2021. The announcement by Facebook CTO that they're shutting down all their face recognition technologies is a very public announcement. And the reason given is the regulatory environment being unclear, not certain what is allowed and what isn't. and maybe that is further down the line from people freaking out, but that was the reason.
So Tal, if we begin to kind of segue to our main topic for today, as you're working in these companies mainly on questions of facial recognition, how do you become interested in deep fakes?
So, deepfakes is a sort of blanket term that is overused and overloaded, and there's many people use deepfakes to mean different things. When it comes to faces, I was interested in what you would today call deepfakes long before deepfakes were deep or called deepfakes, and that was from that had nothing to do with some of the applications that you're seeing them use today. When you want to, we know this. When you want to train an AI model, certainly modern AI models, you need a lot of data, a lot of examples. If you want to train something to recognize, James, you mentioned earlier, one face, multiple faces. If I want to recognize you, and all I have is just your bio picture, I need to train my model to recognize you not only from your bio picture where you're looking nicely at the camera and making it easy for everyone to recognize you. I want to be able to recognize you from different angles. I want to be able to recognize you with different expressions. I can't go knock on your door and start snapping pictures of you, or follow you around with a camera and collect pictures of you in different settings and scenarios. So one of the things we were playing with is how can we introduce variations to facial appearances in order to be able to train models to recognize better. And that was maybe my first steps into synthetically manipulating or generating faces. Later that evolved, that with the introduction of deep networks and the quality that they brought and so forth.
So in other words, you're saying you need to take a 2D image and then turn it into a 3D model of how that head would work in different contexts. And that process is actually the generation of a deep fake.
That's one of the things you can do, yes. Take a face and slap it on a 3D model, whether it's your 3D model or someone else's, it doesn't actually matter. But and then rotate it to different angles to see what you would look like. Yeah, but also change your expression. Also, maybe take your face and put it in another scene with someone else there. Just show what you would look like if you were in a photo that's completely different from the one that we have. That was something that we called face swapping at the time, but now also falls under the big umbrella of deepfake.
So just to reiterate, in some ways, part of the historical origin story of what we call deepfakes today is the process that companies use to train their facial recognition algorithms, essentially by creating synthetic versions of the one face that they had.
Yeah, this is called data augmentation. It is. It's very common practice in learning. I don't know if this is still something. If this is how this is done today. Again, big tech, I think, mostly shut down their face recognition products some time ago. But yeah, that was certainly one of the initial motivations. Was how do you do data augmentation? Although there were people doing face swapping and facial manipulations even before us, and they were usually from computer graphics. So they were doing this to I don't know, for production purposes, Photoshop, not the product, but photoshopping the verb.
So maybe we should take a step back and come up with some kind of working definition of deepfakes before we continue. So broadly speaking, let me suggest kind of the way that I use it. It's mainly generated videos that can, but can also be generated stills that can make it seem as if people are saying or doing things that they're not saying or doing, and can make it look like things are happening in still photography that didn't happen. So it's the synthetic generation of very lifelike videos and stills. Is that fair?
I would even broaden the term, at least to match my understanding of how the popular perception of it is. It is any use of a computer to generate or manipulate media. Media can be video, could be stills, could be audio,
Yep.
could be text. ChatGPT is deep faking articles and papers and whatnot. So all that is, you could say, deep fake.
Voice
Yeah.
voice cloning.
Voice cloning, yeah,
Yeah.
this is generation or manipulation. The manipulation, the distinction is I don't know if you want to make that distinction, yes or no, but it is taking your face and opening your eyes because you were blinking in the middle of the family photo and don't want to take that photo again and have everyone just because you had your eyes closed at that second. As a manipulation. Another form of manipulation is a model that wants to change their lip size or waist size or whatnot. So that's photoshopping. That's also manipulation. That would also fall under the broad definition of a deep fake.
Yeah.
And if you're getting a sense that this definition is maybe very broad and captures things that have actually been around before the recent wave of AI, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this goes back since the very early days of technology being available to capture media. Very early days of cameras, for example. There were already manipulations happening to change people's perception of reality.
Yeah, although it does seem like the potential impact of the technology has sort of exploded in the last 3 years. Just put sort of three case studies or examples on the table, both positive and negative, as it were. So on the sort of productive side, the technology is being used to de-age actors, like in the recent Tom Hanks film that has him and his partner kind of coexisting in the same space over a period of long decades and being made to look younger and older. So it's being used in the movies, but on the other hand, there's the famous political manipulation cases where the politician is seen to say something sensitive in order to influence elections. We know that the Russians and the Chinese have been particularly capable in this area. And then there's the sort of revenge pornography or just fake pornography kind of contexts in which faces are spliced onto pornographic images generated famously of Taylor Swift. So those are the two kind of more pernicious use cases, the fake pornography and the fake political statements. And I think these are the kind of things that catapulted it into people's anxieties.
Although I'll say that I think most election observers of the elections around the world this year expected more interference from deep fake technologies than they saw. Doesn't seem to have swayed very much this year.
Well, I have a lot to say about this. So I'll start with this is a new technology, and I challenge you to come up with an example of a technology that mankind has invented that cannot be misused with enough creativity. I mean, if you don't like the idea of technology introducing risks, you should have stopped with the wheel. Even that's being used.
That's what I keep saying.
Tal, now you're my favorite guest.
No, but I'm going to take a very, very strong turn in a few seconds.
I keep trying to convince James to walk, but he doesn't want to.
This isn't a dichotomy type of black or white situation. There's a lot of grays. Some technologies can be more easily used for good and more easily used for bad. Guns, for example, have a much bigger potential of being used for bad, than I don't know, plastic bands. I don't know, than aspirin. So there's a line someplace in there, and I'm not claiming to know or to be able to say where that line crosses and what should be on one side of it and what should be on the other. One way or another, though, I do want to challenge the idea that the deep fakes or the deepfake technology today has a much bigger risk of being being abused. You said earlier, Near, that the bigger potential of these harms happening. I don't think it's the deep fakes per se that are creating that bigger potential. I think the bigger potential is, if anything, deep fakes are maybe a symptom, a small rash that hints at a much more serious health problem. Again, they're not new, and people have been showing fake images of politicians ever since there were images of politicians. And there's many studies I don't know if many studies, but at least I heard of studies that talk about people actually knowing when they're seeing something fake, but still buying into it. And so the idea of it being fake is not necessarily what's causing people to have more anxieties. That's not where that's coming from. Again, deep fakes, not new.
Yeah.
You've worked on the text to image generation. I think one of the things that people, futurists, tend to see when they look at what's happening in that field is we could be in a future with augmented reality where we're all walking around in our own reality. And this is kind of a symptom of I think what you're pointing to, the kind of broader epistemic unraveling that our creativity has now allowed us to shape reality in a way that we're never sure what exactly we're looking at. Or is that the kind of broader problem that you're pointing to?
I'm thinking about things that are much more immediate.
Oh, okay.
I can pick many examples of this, but maybe something that is closer to our hearts as academics. The academic review process. Okay, you're a scientist, you write papers, those papers go out to reviewers, those reviewers read those papers and tell you all the ways that your paper is very, very bad and needs to be rejected, but then after a while they accept it. You know the trick. I don't think this is news to anyone. You can take ChatGPT and help you as the scientist write your paper much faster. Now you're saying, sure, but they can't do, first of all, if many papers are just review papers, not just, many papers are review papers, and ChatGPT and other LLMs can write beautiful review papers in seconds. So the whole review, the whole genre of review papers is right now being threatened. But they can actually do more and slowly doing even more than that. So creeping into the creative process and doing some of that. Now, that's on your side or our side as the scientists submitting the papers. But then the papers go out to reviewers. The reviewers are people who are doing it mostly because they're volunteering as academics. Reviewers typically do not get paid. They have a lot of papers on their desk that they need to review. How do you review a paper very, very quickly? You drop it onto, this isn't a recommendation. I'm not soliciting this. I'm just saying this is something that I've actually seen. So I've seen reviews submitted with very clearly text that indicates that this was auto-generated and copy-paste from some chatbot. And so what you have a review cycle where the authors are AI to some extent, if not full extent. The reviewers are AI to some extent, if not full extent. What does the peer review process, what does science progress look like? So what does the review process look like? Now, I'm taking this from my own personal perspective, but let's take this to any other domain. Let's take this to your medical diagnosis, your medical treatment. There's a study that came out in JAMA. It's still limited, but it's rather new and made headlines, I think, a few weeks ago, where it compared how well physicians do with or without the aid of ChatGPT, and how well ChatGPT does without the human physician interfering in diagnosing difficult medical cases. I may be wrong with the numbers, so please don't hold me to the digits. But ChatGPT, with the help of ChatGPT, they did slightly better than without. So already ChatGPT gives them an edge. But if you remove the physician if the physician leaves the room and it's just ChatGPT, there's a dramatic increase in the accuracy of the diagnosis. So you know that you're going to get very good, potentially very soon you're going to get very good diagnoses, but that's not all it does. But wait, there's more. It does this without you having to have a comprehensive healthcare plan, book a meeting with your physician, and then pay the copay. It's there in the middle middle of the night to answer your problems. Again, not saying this is a good idea. Please don't misunderstand, but I'm saying the accessibility of it with a reasonable degree of accuracy makes it so you can imagine people starting to use that. So what happens to the medical profession if people slowly start to lean on ChatGPT versus going to the doctor? Now, take this to your lawyer. Take this to your manager in a company that has a group of people that are writing an annual report, and it takes them 3 months or 6 months to do that, and now they're done in a week. What happens to all these people who are now making salaries, who are now earning money? And this is highly educated people, mind you. This is not blue collar being replaced by automation. This is not that that's good, but I'm just saying this is different.
Yeah, but pretty soon we're going to have millions of humanoid robots going into factories. Firms all over the world gearing up for that. So blue collar work is next, I think.
So you're absolutely right. And a game I like to play with people, sort of a coffee over drinks game is what profession do you think is AI proof, AI including robotics, in, I don't know, 10, 20 years? Now, just the fact that you need to, well, I have a few ideas, but you're not going to like them. Just the fact that this is a question that causes people to say, and start thinking, the implications of that on economy, on industry, on society are profound. Long before we strap on VR devices and long before you have Skynet shooting lasers at human rebels. This is immediate.
Tal, let me just, there's a lot there. Let me just start to unpack it. There's a distinction there in the first place between AI replacing reality, or kind of, as it were, faking reality, and AI replacing professions or replacing actual skills. So, and I understand it's the same technology and that's the connection, but let me go back to, for a moment, to the kind of, fake articles, fake pictures, fake voice, fake videos, before we go to the doctor and the lawyer. And you said correctly, for which you got applause from Jay, that this has always been around, and this is not really a qualitative change, but rather just a bit of a change of degree. But there is the kind of democratizing of the technology, where it used to be harder to fake a video, and it used to be harder to fake an article. But now, if Jay annoys me with his techno-optimism, I can just make a video of him tomorrow smashing some computers and post it on Twitter and embarrass him. I won't. Don't worry, Jay. I'm too much of a mensch. But does that put a question mark on your argument, Tal, that there's nothing new under the sun? The fact that my kid can do this tomorrow, well, my kid can definitely do it better than I can, but that I can do it tomorrow.
Certainly it's easier, but I don't think that's the factor that's making it. I don't think that the ease, the lowering of the bar and accessing deep fakes, that is what's making the step change difference. I think the technology that changed the you mentioned democratizing this. The democratizing, the way I see it at least, that matters is not the democratizing of AI and deepfake generation. The democratizing that happened is the democratizing that happened through communication channels. Social media, maybe yes, but before that, there's a lot to unpack here that maybe I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. But the fact that anyone today can share any opinion is wonderful for many reasons. Okay, I rely on that on a daily basis. I think everyone does. But it also means that a lot of bad things are being spread. And whether or not they're spread through a fake image, or they're spread through text, or they're spread through images that were edited with Photoshop or with glue, doesn't really matter. The fact is that you have these rumors and you have these fake realities being spread because the infrastructure is there to spread them. I'm not, by the way, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that, again, I'm going back to my earlier comment. I'm not saying the internet is bad. I'm not saying social media is bad, not at all. All I'm saying is that the deep fake aspect of it is not the thing that really makes a difference here.
With generated text, we've got an arms race between firms that are promising that they can detect generated text and those who are trying to generate it. And I think that arms race is being lost. We're generating text that can't be detected. And similarly, there's been an arms race about trying to detect generated or manipulated images over decades, I imagine, that what technologies you could apply to that. And we're perhaps transcending their ability. But do you think that our AI capabilities, as you're describing them, will catch up and give us bullshit detectors that will allow us to discern reality and fiction?
So again, I want to. There's some subtleties here. There's some nuances here. Looking at an image and saying, is this image generated or is this text generated? Yes or no? I don't think that's an interesting question to ask. And the reason I don't think that's an interesting question to ask is because pretty soon everything is going to be either generated or manipulated to some extent. And what is the benefit of saying everything is generated? You want me to tell you if this image is generated? I'm going to say yes 90% of the time. I'm going to be correct, and 90% is the number that the World Economic Forum was predicting a year ago. So I'm just going to say yes. Just saying this is generated, not interesting. But I am making a distinction. It is at least in my mind an entire different field or subfield of AI between the detection of generated or synthetic text versus the detection of, is this content problematic? So now the question is not whether or not something is generated. I don't really care if it's generated. If you snap a picture, if you out of context take a picture or take a sentence that anyone says and publish it, even if it is genuine, just taken out of context, it could have a devastating effect. It's easy to imagine. So I don't really care if it was generated by AI, yes or no. I want to know if this is okay. Now, what is okay? Okay, we can have a conversation about that. It could be anything from child pornography, as Nir mentioned earlier, to intellectual property violations, to I don't know, misinformation, hate speech, counterband, whatever you want. But this is AI that's asking a question not about the authenticity of the physics that created that media, rather the content itself. Still AI, still a question, but it's a very different question.
Just on this, I saw an article today that Character AI had to take down 24 versions of Luigi Mangione copies, chatbots, that were trained on his public text. And it's like they were doing that obviously as an homage, right? It's not, there's no offense against Luigi Mangione here. But the content was deemed, supporting terrorism, so take it down.
Look, there could be someone, not very likely, and I agree that this would be much harder to do, but there could be someone who's doing this homage, not by training a chatbot, but by having 24-hour hotline that you can call and speak with that is equally good or bad.
OpenAI just rolled out 1-800 number to talk to ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's equally good or bad, whether or not there's a live person on the line or there's an AI. And the flip side of that goes to Nir. You were saying you want to differentiate between these two things. The flip side of that is that it's equally irrelevant whether it's human or AI when you're asking it medical questions or legal questions or reviewing papers. It's about the content. It's not about the actual physics of what generated it.
Oh, so let me push back on that in the sense that I actually think it is about the physics of what generated it. The premise is that our ability to value anything is related to scarcity and abundance in some basic way. So part of why I enjoy watching a very good documentary, say on Netflix, is that there aren't very many good documentaries on Netflix. And certainly there are not many good documentaries on Netflix that are relevant to my interests. But in the world of generative AI, there can be as many micro-tailored near documentaries relevant to my interest as I can only imagine. And on the one hand, if our attention span was endless, that could be wonderful. But given that it's not, I would, in that kind of world where generation is synthetic and endless, I think that there would be two kinds of questions. One, there would be a trust issue of like, am I seeing something? Am I seeing something that's real? I guess you're starting to say that it won't matter, that we're going to shift our attention from the real to the valuable, and that's an interesting point. That's a very interesting point. The other concern would be that though that we'd get a sort of sense of collective exhaustion and jadedness. You'd be like, screw this Netflix shit. I can't deal with it anymore, right? Because of the sheer amount of information. So I guess the value and scarcity connection, I don't think is quite taken into account when you say that it doesn't matter.
You're absolutely right. One thing that AI does do is produce mass quantities. But again, I think the deciding factor is not necessarily the AI. I think this is a process, and I think one of the big step changes was the democratization of the broadcast and the quality that you're talking about. You will still find things that are interesting for you. They'll be tailored, and different generators, I guess, or different sources will be competing on your attention in ways that we know, and maybe ways that we don't know.
I'm already getting served by the algorithms on social media, short video content that's like 30 seconds, a minute of what could be the trailer for a science fiction movie, beautiful video, fully realized. And so if I see that a lot of that, yeah, I suppose it kind of degrades it. But what you're saying, Tal, is that this is the democratization. Everybody who has a vision would now be able to at least realize it in this way. And then we'll judge on the basis of other aesthetic criteria, like the coherence of your vision.
For better or worse. So I'm not saying that this is a good thing. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I'm saying that the ability to generate is just another step down the road that we're on for a while.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. This is something Jay and I fight about incessantly, but we can have you weigh in.
By the way, I'm realizing that one thing I want to stress: the deepfake images. When I say Nir, I think you and I agree more than maybe is apparent. That's why I stopped you. When I push back against deepfakes being a big deal, I'm mostly talking about the use of deepfakes for misinformation and things like that, taking images and altering them.
Yeah.
I do think that the implications, as I mentioned earlier, that the implications are huge. The implications of these AI tools are massive. That's the societal and economic implications that I mentioned before. So if you get the impression that I'm saying, no, AI is not making any difference, no, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Oh, no. I get that. I'm just trying to connect the different categories with which on the basis of which we value stuff in the first place, and I'm wondering if they're gonna change. So I like Hilary Mantel, the historical novelist. She's a wonderful historical novelist. She passed away recently, and she has X number of books, and they're finite. And I'm going through them, and with a degree of sadness that it's coming to the end of the list, and she's not going to write anymore. Her books are huge. On the other hand, all of them, or many of them, are very big books, and you could train an AI model to write in a Hilary Mantel book. if she say this is not the case, but say X hypothesis that she has 15 books, and that set is finite because she's dead. If AI produced the 16th Hilary Mantel book, I wouldn't want to read it. Just like even though my DJ on Spotify, my AI DJ on Spotify is excellent and gives great recommendations, there's a visceral response I have when it comes on the speakers and I turn off. I'd rather drive without music than listen to it. I don't know if that's a sensibility, which is what my friend Jay would say, a stupid sensibility, as I've heard before, or if that's part of the actual psychology of valuing, where both the real and the idea of scarcity matter. So I think that's one question I have. And the other question I have is about trust. When you have so much information, I think we saw this with drones in New Jersey fiasco. When you have so much information, people just lose the ability to have institutional trust in any of it being true, and they come up with craziness.
So the Hilary Mantel example, you won't read her next book. I understand that because you value the fact that it was written by her. Remember the game I talked about earlier of what's going to be. So the answer to that is and I have concrete examples. Any field where it is the actual human performing the whatever it is that matters rather than the outcome. When we're talking about the Hilary Mantel, maybe this is the book by her and this is what you value. You value her books. But if, God forbid, you had some medical condition, would you go to a physician that is human because you value human physicians if you know that you can get better advice for free 24 hours? I'm not saying that's the case right now, but it may well be very soon. If you can get better advice 24 hours by an AI,
That's a good question.
You would go to the AI 10 times out of 10. The same with a lawyer, the same with anything else. Right now, maybe that's not the case.
Right. Once the burden of proof was lifted, I would probably, yeah.
So,
at this point, I would be
trust issue comes in.
I would be delighted if George R. R. Martin started using AI to finish his works. I think that would be a good use case right there. I mean, just to think about the complexity of being an author, having an AI to keep track of all your P's and Q's and the continuity of your plot, and this person was here and not there, and I can see it being a huge assistant. And those kinds of things.
Different from writing, though.
So you have Stephen King who famously uses an old school typewriter to write all his books. But I've seen examples in many different places. It doesn't really matter where, but I've seen examples of texts written as, again, articles, books, online stories that were generated, and they're getting better and better.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you value or want to know that these are words that were written by that particular author with that particular author's time and investment and effort, then yeah, that makes sense. But a lot of people are just, a lot of times you're fine with, not a lot of people, a lot of times you're fine with the service that you're getting if it is readily available and good enough.
Tal, I've been thinking about trying to use Gemini 2 or 3 or whatever it's going to be to build my own personal avatar, to put in text and video of myself and have it become a simulacrum of some kind, just to experiment. Do you think that and then we'll be getting agentic features in the next year, so you'll be able to tell it, every year, make sure to order beautiful roses from the cheapest company for my wife or whatever, and they'll do that. Are you equally excited about these agentic capabilities, and how do you think it's going to play into this identity and face issue? Because I see it immediately connected in this case.
What are you describing? Let's take a step back. You're describing automating parts of your life.
Right. And that could come without any of the visual and audio stuff.
Yeah, but automating, and you're absolutely right. It could be with or without. You're automating part of your life. By automating part of your life, you are freeing more time for yourself to do other things. Arguably, opening up your enabling the ability to produce more, to be more productive, because you don't have to spend time looking for the flower shop. You can be sitting and writing your next paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that sounds amazing. But then remember, so is everyone else. And so the expectations are going to change accordingly. And so where it is now, yeah, it's saving me a few hours. Very soon it's going to be, yeah, you're expected to do that because that's something you're just going to be expected to do more.
Right. I'm old enough to remember when it was rude to have an answering machine, or some people thought it was rude. And then it got rude not to have an answering machine, not to have, and now kids don't even use voice text anymore. So
I don't know. I can imagine what research like that would look like, but I can't say that I remember any of it, any such research result. But as technology progresses, do we have more or less spare time?
we haven't had more spare time. We haven't perceived that we had more spare time. I think we actually have, but people seem to be burdened by life in ways that they didn't used to.
So and I'm actually old enough to remember each time that a new technology was introduced, and the vision of it saving a lot of time and clearing, and now you wouldn't have to do this, and now you wouldn't have to do that. Ultimately, we're at least as busy. I think maybe even busier, because the with you being more productive, so is everybody else.
Right. I worked for 2 years in Sri Lanka, and I joked that if you accomplish one thing a day in Sri Lanka, you were ahead of the game. It was just so difficult to get everything done. But now, yeah, before breakfast, I've accomplished more than I used to.
I mean, going back to the kind of long view history of technology perspective taking, isn't it the case that in the history of technology, any capacity that becomes mechanized, technologized, synthesized, whatever you want to call it, loses value due to the fact that it has moved to that category? So, for example, writing by hand or penmanship is a niche, kind of useless kind of skill. Calculating numbers is a niche, useless kind of skill. Spelling is a niche, useless kind of skill, all because machines can do them. What I'm seeing with the acceleration of generative AI is that a bunch of fundamentally human activities are going to move to that same basket, like writing in general, like movie making, like writing novels, painting, lots of forms of art. Now, I'm sure that they will be replaced by other ones, which we don't know yet. That's probably true. That doesn't mean that it's not a genuine loss, right? So,
the things you've mentioned, all the things you've mentioned, I don't know if you've noticed, but they were all sort of mechanical skills.
Right.
They're
also mechanical.
Those
like writing is cognitive and mechanical at the same time, and so is painting.
Well, the penmanship, I don't know if that's something that
right. Penmanship and calculating, you're right, are mechanical, but then writing a novel or writing a good essay, which sooner or later is going to be taken over by large language models.
That's my point. So far, the technologies that were introduced were sort of I don't know. I didn't survey all of them, but just in general terms, we're mechanical. You have light, so you don't need to, I don't know, electricity. You don't have to light a candle. Okay, so these sort of things. The AI is unique. Remember that computers are called, that's their original name, universal computing machines. Universal because they can compute anything that is computable. Anything that can be done theoretically, they can do. And AI is enabling them to do that right now. You couldn't do that with a wheel or with bronze, but you can do that with AI. It replaces things that up until recently we thought were exclusively human capabilities. And now what you said earlier about this will be replaced by something else that we don't know about, I'm putting it out there as maybe, I'm not saying that's the case, but maybe there's a glass ceiling to creativity, and we're there. And what's going to happen above that? What can we do creatively that computers can't? And that's the question that I don't think was ever asked for any new technology that came before. There were always, if you can't do this, then you can do that. You don't have to shovel coal into the the furnace, now you can just, I don't know, learn how to drive the train instead.
Yeah, and that's been part of this, sort of stochastic parrot argument about large language models, namely that they are actually operating in a similar kind of way to the way that we learn language. And, I am actually completely receptive to this premise that there may well be a glass ceiling on creativity, that computers can do probably anything ultimately that we can do, that's quite possible. I'm just not on board with, I mean, this is an argument that I've been having with Jay. For me, that would be an argument not to question the premise that you just articulated so compellingly, but to just stop the development. If that's the case, if you are going to increasingly have computers that can do what you can, it might be time for a kind of nuclear-like arms control regime.
What is the social good that you would posit near that would be achieved by that? By saying we're not going to do technology anymore.
Not technology anymore.
As usual, Near's Luddite musings are just, I wish the world would stop so I could get off. And I'm like, that's not a policy proposal, Near, nor is it well defined in terms of the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. You're not being completely fair. My proposal is that there's different kinds of technology, and that generative AI in some ways, because it goes to the heart of what it means to value anything, is qualitatively different from a television, and that one as a result requires more skepticism. That in general the principle would be the more a technology goes to the heart of being human and our capacity to value, the more skepticism it deserves. For example, if Tal says something like, increasingly it looks like computers are going to be able to do everything that we can do cognitively, so artificial general intelligence, basically, then yeah, where's the Kantian argument left for human rights as special thinking, generalizing, universalizing, self-commanding kind of creatures, which has been for 200 years the foundation for most decent political systems? Where's the argument for that if computers can do everything that we can do, right? So I would say, yeah, you do slow down on generative AI.
Walk me through how that would look.
Slowing down on generative AI, or it would never happen.
Well,
but
how do you pull the brakes on something like that right now?
I mean, I know what I'm doing. I'm not listening to the AI DJ on Spotify, and I'm not reading AI novels, and I'm not watching AI generated content, and I'm trying to write for newspapers and magazines, etc., trying to spread this specific neighborhood of the Luddite gospel, and
Sure.
hope that some people, very few, are convinced by me rather than by Jay in our podcast, and so on and so forth. It's a losing battle. If you want my real answer, it's a completely losing battle.
And I'm sorry to throw you under the bus, James, but let's assume you do that, but at the same time, James doesn't, and because he is using AI, his output is twice or scale order of magnitude greater than yours.
Not true yet, but
what happens then? And you're talking
I'm like the well-dressed gentleman going down on the Titanic while listening to the violin. And that's all I want.
And I just want to comment about the AGI thing. I think AGI is overrated. And the reason I think it's overrated is because, look, people are having, there's reports of people having deep relationships with their AI chatbots already.
Yeah.
I don't know what the AGI sticker on the box is going to add beyond what we have right now, other than maybe more functionality, more accuracy, and more. This is just further down the line. I don't think there's a AGI. We're already at a point where
we're pretty close.
Much of our day-to-day interactions with specialists, much of our day-to-day interactions with is AI does that. And the idea of creativity, you didn't say that, but I've heard others do. AGI maybe is creative like humans are. The current AI, yeah, it can generate text, but it's no Shakespeare.
But
Okay?
this is what is fascinating to me about this digital twin idea of building yourself a digital twin for work or play or life, whatever, is that you don't want it to wake up, right? You don't want your toaster to wake up and say, I'm not going to make you toast because I'm now self-aware and I have better things to do. And you don't want this AI that you've invested in creating with your own labor that is supposed to act like you. You don't want it to have a mind of its own, right? You want it to have your mind. So this idea of what exactly we mean by AGI, what you're implying is general common sense understanding of the world that reduces common sense mistakes so that it acts more like a conceivable sentient being, but not necessarily self-awareness. Do you have any intuitions about this? So, when we would see a machine that had intents and desires of its own and a self-concept and started acting in the world?
Not to open any kind of worms here, but how do I know that you're self-aware and have? If we're going back to arguments, John Cyril versus Turing, Chinese room versus. I'm strongly on the Turing side, by the way, and vehemently opposed to John Cyril's Chinese room for many reasons. I know that's an old argument to have, and there's a lot happened since then. But the avatar self-awareness, again, that's nice and that's great, but that's just one of a myriad of ways in which AI is already a significant part of our lives and becoming even more so regularly. Look, I developed some of this. I'm behind some of it. I still am. I'm a researcher. I still do work on AI. I'm of the generation that grew up on Gödel, and Bach and Douglas Hofstadter and arguing whether or not computers can think, and that's where I started my journey into AI, trying to see if that's possible, and more from call it a philosophical motivation. I recently heard an interview with Douglas Hofstadter, and he was saying that we thought this was going to happen, but not so quickly. And I'd like to echo that. I don't see AI necessarily as a bad thing, even in the long run. I just think that the rate at which we're moving is terrifying to me.
Tal, let me take you back to your point for a moment about whether there are AI-proof professions, and let me phrase the question in this way. If a high school graduate came to you and said, Mr. Hessner, what should I major in college? What do you think you'd advise?
Tell you what I tell my children. I would tell them to study medicine for things like surgery, and because of things like surgery, which require mechanics that even with robotics, I'm assuming is going to take longer than just asking chatbot what is this rash. Maybe that's not a long enough gap, but it is a gap. I think that's going to come after, and because things like medicine have regulatory protections that make it difficult, I think, for AI to just swoop in. If you're asking me what would in the long run, what I can confidently say in the long run is AI proof, probably professional sports, and the reason for that is you wouldn't really want to see two. There's a robot, I think, at Toyota Research Institute in Japan showed a robot that can shoot baskets, that can walk, dribble, and shoot baskets, and it just broke the record of distance record. So he was shooting it from outside, from the other side of the court, but even behind that, and he can walk and dribble. I don't think it would be interesting to see a basketball game where those are the actors. You'd want to see humans playing. You'd want to see humans running. You want to see humans, because that's what we're doing. We're competing. We're competing using our human physiology, I guess. Another thing maybe is live performances, but I don't know a lot of fields that are not going to. I can't think of other fields that are not going to experience.
Two decades ago, I think people would have said that sex work would be one of the things that would be difficult to automate. And now we've got on OnlyFans cam girls who are programming AIs to clone their identity so that they can interact with their fans 24/7. And it's the technology we've been talking about, identity cloning, but for the purposes of sex work. And it seems to be displacing all kinds of other sex work out there. So I just wonder whether any of the things that we think require high human touch are going to be in the end necessary. I've worked when I was a graduate student on doctor-patient relationship. People assumed that patients will always want a doctor. But as you pointed out, if you can call ChatGPT in the middle of the night and show them your symptoms and get a better diagnosis than you get from a doctor, why would you do that? You would stop doing that.
And by the way, there's research going back. I don't know if there's research about AI, physicians' use of AI, other than what I mentioned. In that case, that was the point of the experiment, was to see how they do it. But even going back to I think 2013 or something, there were research on how physicians were using online tools and online search engines. This is before the AI. That it turns out that quite a lot of them, once you leave their office, they turn over to the computer and Google up your symptoms. So even before that, physicians a lot of times relied on technology. I'm guessing they're relying. If they're not already, then they will start relying more and more on technology as time progresses. And I'm pretty sure people are going to cut the middleman and just rely on the technology directly. And they're going to do that with a lot of fields.
Your point about the fact that adding human judgment to these LLMs sometimes reduces, and I think increasingly in the future will reduce the efficacy or the quality of the result. And so, yeah, I mean, with self-driving cars, people have been asking for a while, when will it get good enough that we begin to ask why humans are still driving cars?
So driving cars, we're on a road and we're constantly getting better and better. And there are self-driving cars. I mean, if you walk down San Francisco, there's autonomous taxis that you can call up and they'll pick you up and drop you off, and it's all the rage, taking selfies with them. It's not going to be very novel soon, I guess. But cars are driving. There's a lot of the barriers that we're seeing are not necessarily technological, they're regulatory. So if a car, a self-driving car is an accident, who do you sue? Who's liable for that? And that's something that regulators have to figure out. And until they do, you're going to see technology developing, but you won't necessarily see that technology on the road. When it comes to legal advice, medical advice, proofreading, coding, anything like that, you're already getting something that does a decent job. And if you look a year ago, much better than what it did a year ago. So how good will it be a year from now?
I think we've depressed Nir into silence. Nir, do you want to?
Yeah.
I'll remind you, Nir, phronesis. We're going to lose phronesis.
Well, you clearly have already, but we are losing phronesis. I mean,
we're moving fast. I'm on your side, James, in principle, but the speed is pushed me to Nir's side of the board.
I mean, again, I think for me, there's a distinction between, I think the world that you're describing is coming and it's already here. I'm particularly surprised, Jay, because, you have socialist sympathies. This sounds very alienated to me. A doctor-patient relationship, in part, is successful not only because of the diagnostic acumen of the doctor, but because of the actual human relationship there. I haven't heard anyone yet say, I'm so happy about this visit because the AI answered my, questions so much more efficiently and comprehensively and was so available. What people are happy about is if they have a human moment with the doctor, if the doctor, gives them their cell phone once in a while so that they can it is still human beings with human problems interacting with other human beings who tend to be bigger experts than they are, et cetera, et cetera. So you're taking away the whole, what psychologists sometimes call the whole therapeutic alliance aspect of these interactions. And, obviously, if you take it out of psychotherapy, the whole thing collapses. But there's a correlate of that in medicine, call it bedside manner, call it whatever you want. And that is just going to go poof and disappear from these relationships.
I just want to point out that it sort of appears like near you're saying, don't worry about the technology. And in that sense, you're just standing next to James. Don't worry about
I'm on the same
let the
page.
technology move forward. And by the way, I'm talking in absolutes just because it's a conversation, but
Right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people who would prefer to talk to a physician. Physicians do have a lot of things that they can provide beyond just the medical advice, and the same with a lawyer, and the same with a psychologist, and the same with all these things. I'm not saying that tomorrow people are just going to drop their visits to the doctors. I think it's going to be a process. It's going to be gradual, but none of these things will happen in isolation. So if you want to have that doctor-patient relationship and you go to the doctor to have that because you have a doctor that you really like going to, I still think that you would, on occasion, skip the doctor's visit if you can, like an emergency visit in the middle of the night because you saw something and then ChatGPT told you you have to worry, then you skip it. Now, that's one visit that you're skipping with one physician, but there's going to be a lot like you. And so there is going to be
a lot more there's going to be a lot more lonely hypochondriacs. That I think is going to be a real
and plus there is a growing loneliness problem.
Yeah, but there's an 800 number at ChatGPT that they can call now, so I don't think they'll be that lonely.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
But
go.
Nir, you challenged me as a socialist. Let me just point out, Engels' essay, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, makes very clear that there are reactionary ways to oppose what's happening under the onslaught of capitalism, and there are progressive ways to oppose it. And in general, Luddism has been considered one of the reactionary ways. Just telling people to smash the machine is not a solution. Telling them to take over the machine and use it for their own ends. Now, what does that mean in this context? I mean, I think, it means you can't rely on the working class.
That's the fun, Jay. That's the fun of being a Luddite. That's the one.
Well, yeah, I know, but it's
being
also
reactionary as being progressive.
It's the laziness of being a Luddite, really. Come on, I agree that we don't have a working class to rely on, and they're not that reliable in the first place. And we're going to have to figure out new ways of pushing forward progressive politics. But just this Luigi Mangione story, I think, is a perfect example. There are going to be unanticipated effects on power. In the first place, getting rid of jobs means getting rid of a big chunk of capitalism, and people are going to have to figure out what to do after that, and that's going to change the world. But there's going to be all kinds of unanticipated effects on social power around the world.
And again, these jobs that are going to be affected, unlike previous unlike cases where new technology was introduced, they're primarily going to be well-educated. I mean, it's different. We haven't seen something like this before. There was a meme I saw a while ago, someone writing, I wished for a robot that would do my dishes and laundry so I can sit and write and draw. And what I got was a robot that writes and draws, and I'm doing the laundry and the dishes. And that sort of captures the whole reason why I'm personally worried. We haven't seen anything like this, and it is not one industry that's going to be affected. I'm hard pressed to think of any industry that wouldn't be disrupted by this, and in a big way.
Yeah.
If the whole medical economics are going to change because people are going to stop or not stop, doctors' visits are going to decline. Same with legal profession. Legal consultations are going to, or legal services are going to be in less and less demand. How is that going to affect the economy? How is that going to affect education? You asked me earlier, well, I would recommend people go and study. People are going to, I think we're seeing it already a little bit, or at least I saw some reports of that. More and more people are studying manual skills, tiling, plumbing, things like that. This is, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not on the side that says, don't worry, it's just going to be great, and it's not going to be big, and it's going to be great. I'm not on that side.
People have been mad at higher education for a lot of reasons, but I think anticipation of technological change and the possibility that their degree would be pointless in the future is one of the big drivers of people's skepticism about higher education right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this points to another neighborhood of the discussion that when these changes happen, one thing I think we can certainly agree on is we're not we're not psychologically ready for it. We don't, for example, I'm not sure that we have the habits to, if there is a sort of a society with more leisure, which remains to be seen, but if there is a society with a lot more leisure, do we have the cognitive and intellectual habits and skills to do something with that leisure? I mean, it seems like that would need to be taught. Not that it can't be, but it's not where universities are geared towards right now. It's not where schools are geared towards right now. Right now, they're factories for job preparation, by and large, or for replication of elites. But neither of those is preparing people for a life in which work has a lot less weight than it did until now. So the required degree of social change would be huge.
Yeah.
Tal, this has been really great.
I'm always delighted to meet nearest friends when they agree with me.
I'm a gentleman, Jay.
I have sort of a cross between the two of you.
Thank you so much, Tal. This has been really great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.